Okay, hello everyone. My name is Mama Afan, matrix number 230048444, and I'll be discussing question one, which is mercantilism is a bankrupt theory that has no place in the modern world. So, discuss. So, looking at this, we need to understand the mercantilism's core principle is that it emphasizes national wealth accumulation through trade surpluses, export promotion, and also government intervention. So, mostly they prioritize self-sufficiency and colonial expansion and also bullion reserves such as gold and silvers as marker of wealth since they're considered as an underlying asset. So why mercantilism is seen as obsolete in the modern world is because modern economics is built on comparative advantage and mutual gain. So they're emphasizing on positive sum trade rather than actually mercantilism zero sum outlook. And then also looking at the global supply chains and interdependence, it makes self-sufficiency nowadays impractical with the countries actually relying heavily on imported components for productions. And also looking back, the protectionism, the central to mercantilism, often leads to inefficiencies like trade wars, stifled innovation, and also higher consumer costs. So, in the end, mercantilism does not address contemporary challenges like digital trade and intellectual property and environment sustainability, which makes mercantilism has no place and not being practical in the modern world.
Hello everyone. So now I'm going to discuss about question two, which is free trade fair? Discuss. So free trade is actually the unrestricted importing and exporting of goods and services between countries. Meaning to say it is a international trade that occurs between two or more countries. And in our group's opinion, free trade is fair because it carries many benefits. Such benefits include three that we have given here. The first and foremost is presence of specialization. So what is presence of specialization? It actually helps each and every country to produce goods and services that it has expertise on due to natural conditions or particular labors that is found in the country. So, meaning to say they have an advantage, competitive advantage compared to other countries in producing the goods and services. So, free trade helps the countries with no access to the particular goods and services to obtain and utilize from the country that produces or specializes in it. This is where the activity of import and exports occur due to certain countries needing certain items from different countries. So, in other words, specialization expands the choice of combinations of goods and choice services that can be used by people from all around the world. In meaning to say, people have more choices and they don't have to worry about not producing the particular goods and services in their own country because they can import and export from other countries. So this makes it a fair platform for everyone because all people can is able to enjoy every goods and services. Next is the decreased market power. So free trade also helps to reduce the market power in a country as there is an emergence of global competition. So when there is a global competition or international businesses come to compete with the local and domestic businesses inside a country, it makes the market power of the country or the monopoly of the country to become reduced. As such, the local domestic businesses can't be over dominant in their own country and have to compete with the international trade in order to be more successful and profitable. So, as a result, it creates a more fair platform for the local businesses and international businesses, and this can also prevent high prices to fluctuate, which might burden the people in the community. So, it produces a fair platform as well. Finally, the last benefit is easier technology transfer. So, technology transfer occurs easily when there is an exchange of goods and services within two countries through free trade. So this ensures that both the countries can learn and adapt to the technology that is used by each other, which ultimately leads to the growth of both the countries. Thus, a fair environment can be induced due to the creation of learning platform for the countries involved in the technology transfer. So technology transfer actually can be produced when two or more countries are involved in international trade, which means, for an example, country A and country B are involved in international trade, so they can learn from each other about the technology and can adapt based on it. So this makes sure that both the countries can learn the strengths and weaknesses of both technology and can utilize and adapt it as much as possible. So that's all from me to prove that why is free trade fair, and we have also discussed the points. So I would like to pass on to the next presenter.
Hello everyone, I'm Tanusha Anna Prompan Saravanan and my matrix number is 230048446 and I'll be your next presenter presenting question number 3. So unions in developed nations often oppose imports from low wages countries and advocate trade barriers to protect jobs from what they often characterize as unfair import competition. Is such competition actually unfair? Do you think this argument is in the best interest of A, the union, B, the people they represent, or C, the country as a whole? To answer this question, the claim of unfair competition arises because of these four aspects. So the first one would be regulatory standards. As we know, developed nations enforce stricter rules and regulations which may increase their production costs compared to the low wages countries. So moving on to the next aspect, which would be the subsidies and support. Governments in low wages countries subsidize their industries and would support them financially, which leads in creating cost advantages. It is because subsidized industries can sell products at lower price, making them more competitive in the international market. Other than that, the third aspect would be wages and labor costs. A developed nation often have high wages and strict labor protection compared to a low wages countries where they can make their import way more cheaper. And lastly, the economic viewpoint. Such competition is not inherently unfair as it reflects comparative advantages where the country specializes in goods they produce the most effective. So, from the perspective of unions in developed nations, it may seem unfair because workers in high cost countries are competing with low cost foreign laborers. Is whose best interests are being served. Let's look at the union's point of view. I would highly agree that this argument is serving their interests. It is because unions aim to protect the domestic jobs and also secure their members' wages. So trade barriers help in preserving jobs in industries vulnerable to imports, maintaining unions' influence. However, protectionism can harm innovation and also productivity in the long term, leading to economic stagnation. This can also be highly related with the second party that we are going to be discussing about, which are the people they represent. So in short terms, protectionism help in job preservation. Wages remain stable, but in the long term, it can be harmful because consumers face higher prices and fewer choices, and the industries dependent on the protectionism risk eventually might decline if they fail to modernize. Okay, so finally, let's have a look at the country as a whole. While protectionism benefits specific group, for example, the union members in manufacturing, it often harms the broader economy. Such as for consumer, the trade barriers increase prices on imported goods, limiting choices and increasing the cost of living. Whereas for exporters, retaliatory tariffs by trade partners can hurt domestic industries reliant on foreign markets. Lastly, for innovation, protecting domestic firms may discourage technological advancement and also efficiency because there is no competition. Hence, economic studies generally shows that free trade fosters long-term growth by encouraging competition, reducing costs, and promoting specialization. Although protectionist policies are politically popular, it leads to inefficiency and also reduced economic growth. So, in conclusion, whose best interests are being served is definitely the unions.
Hello everyone. So for the question 4, what are the potential costs of adopting a free trade regime, and do I think that government should do anything to reduce this kind of costs, and why should they? So the highlight for this question is we need to explain on what consequences of free trade regime and what government role to reduce that kind of consequences. Alright, so for the first one is the consequences of free trade regime is job displacement. So free trade can lead to job losses in industries that they cannot compete with cheaper import. So when country open its border to free trade, the domestic industries may unable to compete with foreign competitors. For example, like companies in Malaysia and China do same shirt companies, but the China one is more cheaper. Then it can give harm for local company like Malaysia that produce the same shirt with the same qualities. So for the second one is income inequalities. So companies will compete with cheaper labor in other countries. So this thing can lead to lower wage for middle class workers, while the owner and executive of the company make more money. The third one is environmental impact. So free trade can cause and lead to increased pollution and resources depletion in countries with less environmental regulation. So this is because the import crude oil service offer more cheaper than the local. So next one is dependency. So country may become overly reliant on import that can risk their supply chain disruption. For example, like Malaysia do rice import from Thailand because in Thailand the rice is more cheaper and more quality. So the country can become vulnerable to change in trade policies, price fluctuation, and political conflict. So it is a risky if the country so much rely on other countries to get some product or something. Okay, so for the government role to reduce free trade impact is, for those first one is protecting local industry. So the government can implement the protectionism, which is the government need to protect local industries and do some borders and to reduce free trade lah. So as you guys know that free trade can sometimes halt local business that can compete with cheaper import. So like government can give them some subsidies, training program and incentive to grow their local business. For the second one is environmental protection. So as you guys know that free trade can also lead to pollution and environmental harm. So the government could require companies to meet certain environmental standards. Like the government can do some rules to the companies. One is fair labor practice. So for the fair labor practice, free trade sometimes leads companies to outsource workplace with low wage and poor working conditions. So the government can enforce the trade agreement that include labor standard fair wage. For the last one is diversifying supply chains. When countries rely too heavily on import for essential goods, so they can face shortage if trade is disrupted. So the government can encourage local business to start something new, like give them incentive or subsidies to grow their local business. So I think that's all for me. Thank you.
Alright, so hello everyone, my name is Muhammad Iqbal bin Yassi and I will present to answer the question 5. So question 5 contains 2 questions. So the first instruction is to reread the country focus is China manipulating its currency in pursuit of a neo-mercantilist policy. So the first question is, do you think China is pursuing a currency policy that can be characterized as neo-mercantilist? And the second question is, what should the United States and other countries do about this? So let's answer this. Alright, so for question 5, do you think China is pursuing a currency policy that can be characterized as neo-mercantilist? So the answer would be China probably manipulating its currency in pursuit of neo-mercantilist policy. Here's why. Alright, so the argument that can be used to say that China did manipulate its currency is, the first thing is historical practices. So China has historically maintained a relatively undervalued currency, which can make its export more competitive. The second one is large trade surplus. So China has consistently run large trade surplus, which can be a hallmark of mercantilized policies. And the last one is foreign exchange reserve. So China has accumulated significant foreign exchange reserve, which could be used to manipulate currency market. Alright, but there are also an argument that can be used to say that China did not manipulate its currency. So the first one is currency appreciation. So in the recent years, China has allowed its currency to appreciate, indicating a shift away from a purely export-oriented model. The second one is economic slowdown. China's economic growth has slowed down, and it has faced capital outflow, leading it to intervene to stabilize its currency. And the last one is complex economics landscape. So China economy is become more sophisticated, with a growing domestic market and a focus on higher value added industry. Alright, and the next question is, what should the United States and other countries do about this? So the United States and other countries have several options to address concern about China's currency policy. So the first one is multilateral approach. So this contains international cooperation, which is working with other countries to coordinate policies and apply pressure on China through international organizations like World Trade Organization (WTO) or the International Monetary Funds (IMF). The next one is strengthening global trade rules. So enforcing existing trade rules and negotiating new ones that address currency manipulation and other unfair trade practices. And the last one is promoting currency market reform. So encouraging China to adopt more flexible exchange rate policy and allow its currency to be determined by market forces. The next one is unilateral measure. So the first one is trade restriction. So restriction means imposing tariff or other trade barrier on Chinese goods to reduce the trade deficits and pressure China to change its policy. The second one is currency interventions. So using foreign exchange market intervention to influence the value of the US dollar and other currency. However, this can be risky and could lead to retaliations from China or other countries. And the last one is financial sanctions. So imposing financial sanction on Chinese company or individuals involved in currency manipulation or other illicit activities. So the last one is diplomatic engagement. So direct negotiations engaging in higher level diplomatic talks with China to address concern about current policy and other trade issues. The next one is public diplomacy. By using public diplomacy to raise awareness about the negative impact of China currency policy on the global economy, it is actually very important to note that each of these options has potential risk and backdrop. A balanced approach that combine multilateral cooperation, targeted unilateral measure, and diplomatic engagement may be more effective way to address the challenges posed by China currency policy. Right, so for question 6, is there a difference between the transfer of high-paying white-collar jobs such as computer programming and accounting to developing nations and low-paying blue-collar jobs? If so, what is the difference, and should the government do anything to stop the flow of white-collar jobs out of the country to countries such as India? Right, there are three key differences. So the first one is skill intensity. So white collar jobs require higher level of education, training and specialized skills compared to blue collar jobs. And the second one is wage premium. So white collar jobs typically offer significantly higher wages and benefits the blue collar jobs. And the last one is economic impact. So the loss of high paying white collar jobs can have a more significant impact on countries' economy, as this job often contribute to innovation, research and also economic growth. Alright, so what should government do? So government intervention is very important. So the first that government can do is job preservation. So job preservation means protecting domestic job and preventing wages stagnations. The second one is national security. So by ensuring the retention of critical skills and knowledge within the country. And the last one is economic stability, which is maintaining a strong domestic economy and reducing reliance on foreign labor.
Hello and a very good day to everyone and Dr. Kwa. My name is Muhammad Hafid bin Osman. I will be answering the question number 7. So to answer this question, we need to know about the entity theory and also the Porter's theory first. The international trade based on the entity theory is based on the economies of scales, network effects, and first mover advantage. All of these will promote economies of scales and also highlight importance of first mover advantage. The firms or country that enter a market early can establish dominance due to the economies of scale, brand recognition, and establish distribution channels. This creates barriers to entry for the latecomers. As on the entity theory also, this will encourage trade between similar nations. The new trade theory explains the patterns in global trade, whereby countries that produce similar products or services end up trading partner. The entity elaborates that these patterns have contributed to monopolistic competition, whereby several companies dominate the global market. And of course, the entity theory will promote economics of scales. The trade enables firms to operate on a larger scales, reducing their average cost and increasing efficiency. This benefits consumer through lower price and greater product variety. Okay, and for the Porter's diamond model, based on the slide, you can see that the relationship between the chance, firm strategy, structure and rivalry, demand and conditions, government, related and supporting industry, factor condition. You can see the relationship through the arrow that I draw in the slides. So after we know about the entity theory and the Porter's diamond models, so what is the recommended policy that, for building national competitive advantage in biotechnology? So the first one is investment in education and research, establishing specialized programs in university to train skilled workers in biotechnology, encouraging partnership between academic institutions and biotech firms, and providing funding for the biotech research. This would enhance factor conditions. The second one is subsidies and financial support, offering subsidies, tax incentives, and grants for the startups and firms in the biotechnology sector to help offset initial costs and promote economies of scale. This aligns with the new trade theory by providing early-stage financial support. And the last one is stimulating domestic demand, encouraging the adoption of biotech solutions domestically, example in the healthcare and agriculture, to provide a stable base of demand that fuels further innovation and prepare companies for global competition. For the last question, in question 7, are these policies at variance with the basic free trade philosophy? So the alignment with the free trade philosophy, we can say that while some of these policies such as a subsidy and limited tariff might seem at variance with the basic philosophy of free trade, they are justified as strategic interventions aimed at helping the industry grow to a point where it can compete internationally. This approach aligns with the concept of strategic trade policy, where government support in an industry with significant potential to benefit the national economy. And the last one is, other the sector reach maturity, it could then operate within a freer trade environment, having developed the capabilities to compete globally. That's all from me. Thank you.
Question 8. The world's poorest countries are at a competitive disadvantage in every sector of their economies. They have little to export, they have no capital, their land is of poor quality, they often have too many people given available work opportunities, and they are poorly educated. Free trade cannot possibly be in the interest of such nations. Discuss. There are several reasons why free trade cannot be in poor countries' interest. First of all is resource shortages and productivity issues. Poor countries are often dependent on primary industries but face resource shortages. Issues such as a lack of fertile land and poor water quality are common natural resource issues, and these countries also lack the technology to manage or resolve these issues effectively. Furthermore, there is a shortage of human resources. The low education levels make it difficult to find professionals for industries that require advanced skills. The shortage of both natural and human resources leads to low productivity. Since these countries are unable to produce high-quality products, even if free trade offers export opportunities, it is hard to take the actual benefits of trade. Secondly, there is lack of capital and difficulty of attracting investment. If these countries had sufficient capital or could attract enough investment from outside, the issues mentioned earlier could be solved easily. However, these countries lack capital, which becomes a major factor limiting their economic growth and technological development. In particular, when the financial systems of banks or financial institutions are underdeveloped, both business and governments struggle to raise funds or save money. For those countries, investment could be an important alternative, but most of them are not attractive to investors due to their unstable economies, political systems, and small domestic markets. Lastly, we have infrastructure and logistics issues. For a country to trade smoothly with others, it needs to have logistical infrastructure such as harbor, airports, and railways. However, many poor countries face constraints of industrial development due to a lack of such infrastructure. Without adequate logistics infrastructure, transportation costs for trade increase. Poor market accessibility means these countries cannot fully benefit from trade, and they struggle to enjoy the advantages from free trade. Even if these countries attempt to improve their infrastructure to promote trade, they cannot easily resolve these issues due to the capital shortages.
This case shows that international trade in services like finance and healthcare is growing faster than trade in goods, thanks to digital technology. However, different rules and standards between countries are slowing this growth. To make service trade easier, countries need to agree on common regulations. So the key takeaways is divided into 10 points. The first point is growth of services in trade. The share of services in global trade has grown from about 9% in 1970 to over 20% today, with services expanding at a faster rate than goods trade. The second point is digitalization driving trade. Technological advances have made it possible to treat services once thought impossible to treat, such as medical diagnosis. The third point is services dominating economic. Services now make up more than 75% of GDP in many developed countries, becoming the largest part of their economies. The next point is examples of service experts. American universities earn experts from foreign students. The next point is manufacturing vs services. Services have outpaced manufacturing in terms of demand and growth, leading to a shift in the economic structure. The next point is regulatory barriers. Trade in services faces significant barriers, including differences in professional standards and tax regulations. And the next point is national restrictions. France and China impose specific regulatory barriers that hinder cross-border services trade, such as digital taxes, data localization laws. And the next point is digital services tax. Countries like France tax reduce from US tech firms like Google and Facebook, which the US sees as trade barriers, leading to a retaliatory tariff treaties. Next point is need for common rules. To boost service trade, countries need to harmonize regulations and remove barriers. And the next point is international cooperation needed. For service trade to expand, global cooperation on standards and regulations is crucial to remove existing obstacles. So the question is what factors have been driving the growth in cross-border trade in services in recent years? The answer is divided into four parts. The first part is technology. Digital tools, advances in the internet, cloud computing, and automation make it easier to provide services online regardless of location. The second part is globalization. Trade agreements. Countries have made it easier to trade services by reducing barriers and harmonizing rules. The third part is remote work and freelancing. Telecommuting remote work, especially after the pandemic, has made it easier to offer services internationally. And the next is freelance platforms. Websites like Upwork and Fiverr allow people to offer services globally. And the next part is the COVID-19 pandemic effect. The COVID-19 pandemic sped up the digitalization of services, leading to more online service exchanges across borders.
So hello guys, now we are going to talk about the task 3, question 2. Are the gains from trading services different from the gains from trading in physical goods? First one, we're gonna talk about the product nature. The products are divided into tangible and intangible. The value of physical goods is largely determined by factors such as production efficiency, transportation costs, and the tariffs. The main gains from trade in goods come from specialization, economies of scale, and access to a wider variety of goods at competitive prices. Services, on the other hand, are intangible and often involve personal skills, expertise, or knowledge that may need to be delivered in real time, making them more dependent on technological advances and the ability to deliver remotely. The main benefits of trade in services come from reducing cost and improving efficiency. Next, we're going to talk about the trade barrier. Goods are often subject to tariffs, quotas, and transport barriers. Trade agreements such as the WTO help reduce barriers to trade in such goods. However, the service sector faces more complex barriers, such as different regulatory environments, professional standards, licensing requirements, and visa restrictions, something like that. And these non-tariff barriers make trade in services more difficult to facilitate than trade in goods. Moreover, services could face direct government intervention.
Now, let's move on to the next point, which is growth and technological progress. Trade in goods has been growing at a relatively slow pace in recent decades, with export of physical goods growing at an annual rate of about 1% over the past decade. Although trade in goods remains the backbone of international trade, its growth rate is not low relative to that of services. In contrast, trade in services is growing much faster at an annual rate of 30%. The rise of digital technologies such as the internet and cloud computing has enabled many services such as medical advice and financial services to be conducted remotely across borders. This makes the service more adaptable and scalable, resulting in significant gains in trade. Now, for the last point, which is economic structure and development. In many developed countries, the economy is shifting to service-oriented structure, and the share of services in GDP is slowly increasing. The service sector, for example, accounts for more than 80% of US GDP, and that share is growing. This shift reflects the increasing demand for services as society develops. As a result, the potential gain from trade in services could be even greater for developed countries. In contrast, many developing countries are more dependent on exports of physical goods, such as raw materials or manufactured goods. However, even in these countries, trade in services is growing to some extent, especially as digital platforms allow for outsourcing and other platform of cross-border exchange of services. And that's it for question number 2. Thank you.
For case discussion, which is question 3, politicians often bemoan the decline in manufacturing output as percentage of the economy and pledge it to increase both domestic manufacturing and manufacturing export. Is there any rationale for arguing that trade in service? So this is our question. So the reason to argue that trade in service is important, same as trade in manufacturing, is uh, the global market shift to service economy. So most jobs are now in service sector, as you guys know this day, and this service sector can bring in a lot of money because they often don't have to deal with the cost of manufacturing. They don't have any physical store. Like it is optional for them to have a physical store, and they don't have any shipping physical goods that they need to deal with. So for the second one is service are more flexible because service can adapt to demand quickly, and they just need to understand the trade market service, then they can follow the demand. So like I say, there's no need for shipping and can be delivered online. Also, when they do service, it can save customer and the provider service time. I think I pass to the next person.
Hello, everyone. So now I'm going to discuss about question 9, which is what are the barriers to cross-border trade in services, and why do you think more progress has been made in reducing the barriers to trade in physical goods as opposed to trade in services? So I'm going to discuss about the first part, which is what are the barriers to cross-border trades in services. Firstly, the first barrier is differences in law and regulations. Certain countries may impose regulation that can limit foreign competition in certain services such as healthcare and education sector. So why do they do so? Because the country aims to protect the local and domestic business from the competition of international business since it's an cross-border trade. Next is ethical factor can also be a key factor in not allowing certain services to be carried out in a country. Why? Because certain services can be ethical in certain countries but unethical in other countries. So that is also a reason why difference in law and regulation is a barrier. Next is about technological barriers. So countries with lower level of technology can actually find it difficult to adapt and to utilize new technologies that are being used by other countries in providing their services. So, if let's say there's, as an example, there's two countries which are countries A and country B, and country A have a higher level of technology and country B has lower level of technology. So, when there is a cross-border trade occurring between both these countries, country B with the lower level of technology may find it quite hard to cope with the technology of country A. That is exactly what is technological barriers means. The lack of technology can also create barriers to providing high quality services in certain countries. So, due to the previous event or previous example that have been explained, which is the country A and country B, the lack of technology can actually create barriers to providing high qualities, meaning to say the services cannot be in high productivity and can be only based on how the particular country can produce based on its technology. Finally, the third and last barrier is high transaction costs. International transactions for services that occur can actually be high in cost due to the higher bank fees and processing costs involved compared to local transactions. This burdens the businesses and companies as it adds an additional layer of expenses to them. So, when there is a difference when the local domestic business is doing business in its own country or a business is going internationally. So when a business is going for local and domestic purposes only, they don't have to pay much transaction fees. But when they go internationally, the business might have to pay higher bank fees because they have to convert money in order to do the business or do the cross-border trade. And there might also be processing costs that is being legalized by the international country that they decided to venture in. So thus, there is proof of why there's high transaction cost that is involved in to become a barrier of to cross-border trades in services. So that's all from me. I would like to pass on to the next presenter.
Question 4. Why do you think more progress has been made in reducing the barriers to trade in physical goods as opposed to trade in services? In my opinion, there are three reasons for this. First of all, is difference in timing of emergence. Trading goods has existed since ancient times, and many countries had agreements to facilitate it long before the WTO. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, established in 1947, played a key role in reducing tariffs and trade barriers for goods. In contrast, trade in services began later and developed more slowly due to its complexity. And the General Agreement on Trade in Services was established in 1995. Secondly, we have essential differences between goods and services. Goods have a physical form, which makes it easier to establish quality standards and certifications. While each country has its own tariffs, organizations like the WTO help regulate these differences, making goods trade smoother. In contrast, services are intangible and difficult to standardize internationally due to different laws in each country. Additionally, services are often inseparable from their providers, requiring direct interaction with consumers, which raises issues like visa and immigration. As a result, services face more obstacles than goods in crossing borders. Lastly, we have issues arising from the digitalization of services. Physical goods are tangible, making their movement and logistics simpler. In contrast, services are intangible and more complex. The digitalization of services allows them to move between online and offline platforms, which increases price competition. As a result, many countries seek to protect their domestic markets and may regulate digital services. Additionally, in digital markets, consumers' data is important, but each countries have different data protection laws. These different laws create challenges for the free flow of information and can act as a barrier to international service trade.
For task 3 and question 5, is it in the interest of firms to argue for lower barriers to cross border trade in services? So the answer is yes, because it opens up opportunities for growth, efficiencies, and also competitiveness. So the reason include access to new markets. So firms can expand beyond domestic borders and serve international customers, increasing their revenue and market share. For example, a technology company offering software services can reach clients globally without physical constraints, dramatically broadening its customer base. Next one is cost efficiency through economies of scale. So by accessing larger markets, firms can spread their fixed costs, such as research, development, and marketing, across a wider audience. So this reduces per unit costs and boosts profitability, making firms more competitive in both domestic and international markets. And then we have access to global talents and resource mobility. So lowering barriers often ease restrictions on the movement of professionals and intellectual property. For service oriented firms, this is critical as it allows them to displace skilled personnel wherever they are needed, ensuring high quality service delivery. For example, a consulting firm can send expert to client locations across borders with minimal delays or bureaucratic hurdles. And last but not least is encouragement for innovations. Larger potential markets provide a greater incentive for firms to invest in innovation. The ability to distribute a new service globally maximizes the return and investment in research and development, making innovation more attractive and sustainable.
Hello again, guys. My name is Hafiz. Okay, this is the last question for this case study. So the best answer that I can think of, it depends on the nation's specific context and objective. So a nation should evaluate its economic structure, industry, and development goals before deciding to lower barriers. However, I think if we think about the long-term strategy, the answer is yes. The advantage of lowering barriers, the first one is economic growth. Reducing trade barriers can stimulate economic growth by encouraging imports and exports, increasing competitions and fostering innovations. Business get access to larger markets and more diverse customer base. The second one is we can say about the consumer benefits. Lower barriers typically lead to reduced prices and greater variety of goods and services for consumer. The third one I can think is about attracting foreign investment. An open trade environment can make a country more attractive to foreign investors who seek access to global markets. And the last one is improved diplomatic relations. Lowering barriers can strengthen political and economic ties between countries, fostering collaboration and reducing conflicts. That's all from me. Thank you.